Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 action thriller U.S. Marshals. Now, before we get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to David for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, U.S. Marshals is one of those films that critics at the time absolutely hated this movie for the most part. It got scathing reviews, and audiences have been a little kinder on the movie uh, at the time and over the years. I mean, it made a bit of a profit in the box office as well, but it wasn't anywhere near as big of a hit as The Fugitive. And I think this is definitely a few steps down when it comes to The Fugitive. This is a sequel to The Fugitive and a bit of a spin-off that takes place in the same universe as the 1993 film. And this is one of those films, in all honesty, that I I'm starting to get the criticism, and I'm starting to get why people find this to be disappointing after watching it again. It was not anywhere near as good as I remember it being the last time that I saw this movie. Uh, it was a bit of a letdown, I'm gonna be honest, especially considering the cast, considering that it's a follow-up to The Fugitive. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I thought it was an awful film. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's as bad as Robert Downey Jr. makes it out to be, but it is definitely not as good as it could have been. And there's a lot of missed potential here. For one, I think Stuart Baird was the wrong choice to direct this movie. Stuart Baird is at best an okay director, and he's only really that good when it comes to directing some kind of big bombastic set piece. That's about it. Everything else, he's pretty below average. He doesn't know how to shoot scenes that can create or build any sort of consistent tension. It's very evident in something like Executive Decision, which was his directorial debut. And it's evident here. He isn't that good when it comes to shooting scenes of just people talking or dialogue or anything to really make that really that dynamic or strong. Scenes, they're supposed to have certain kinds of emotion behind them. He's not the best at either. I mean, look at his filmography. He started out his career directing Executive Decision, which I feel is an incredibly dull movie. Then he does this movie, and it's kind of dull in a similar fashion, visually anyway. And then he goes on after this to direct Star Trek Nemesis, and that was really wasn't that well directed. So I think he just progressively either stayed at the same level or just yeah, I think that's really what happened. He just stayed at the same level his entire filmography and never really improved. He never got better. He didn't get worse, but he didn't get better. And say whatever you want about Andrew Davis, but prior to The Fugitive, he had already shown that he was a pretty competent, decent filmmaker with movies like Code of Silence, Above the Law, and Under Siege. Stuart Baird didn't have that. So I don't understand why they went with him as the director, especially for a follow-up to The Fugitive. And what Warner Brothers was probably hoping was going to be a new franchise with a bunch of Fugitive spin-offs. Baird was just not the right guy. I mean, you can tell when it comes to interviews when he's discussing his plans for the movie and why he decided to do certain things or why certain parts of the movie are the way that they are. And what I mean by that is, for instance, there's a lot of scenes in this where it looks like the director is frantically trying to keep up with the cast, and that's because that's exactly what was happening. The director was like, just shoot things, just go fast. Just go fast, run fast, do things fast, and I'll try to catch up. And you can tell, like, it looks like the director is lagging behind the cast, struggling to keep up with the cast in some scenes. And that's because the director deliberately chose to film the film that way. Like, why would you do that? Why would you be like, yeah, how about you all just run around like chickens with your head cut off, and I'm going to do my best to catch up? That is not good. That is a pretty poor game plan and just a poor plan in general from the director. And that's not the only thing that Baird did that made this a film that really wasn't as good as it genuinely could have been. He nerfed Wesley Snipes. He is the reason why Wesley Snipes does no martial arts and is just a brawler, because it was his idea that Wesley Snipes would be a brawler. Why in the world would you deliberately nerf Wesley and his biggest strength? It didn't work in something like Boiling Point, and it doesn't work here. Like, Wesley Snipes is not a brawler. That's not his thing. So I don't understand why you would do that if you have Wesley Snipes in the cast, other than the fact that you know that you can't shoot him properly when it comes to martial arts. And I think that's honestly where the truth lies. Stuart Baird knew that he was going to be bad at shooting Wesley when it comes to fight choreography and fight scenes. So he deliberately was like, I'll just make him a brawler because I don't know how to shoot anything else. That's honestly what I think happened. And he definitely didn't create a very positive atmosphere for the cast or the crew, because Robert Downey Jr. hated shooting this movie so much that he literally quit the production at one point and left for days until he came back and finished his scenes. Like, if it was a good on set atmosphere and the actors felt like they were, being treated fairly, or they were being given a lot of opportunities to succeed, I don't think that would happen. And I know Robert Downey Jr. was going through a tough time at this point, but if you had a director who like made him feel more comfortable and more at home, he probably wouldn't have walked out on the movie. But that's just my take on it. And yes, some of the action bits are okay. They're decently shot. The big stunt showcase, for instance, with the stuntman who is jumping off the building with the rope, or what is it, the cord or whatever it is, and then lands on the train. No, lands on a building and then jumps on a train. Like, that's a pretty well shot sequence. I don't know if Stuart Baird is responsible for that, though. That might have just been a second unit director, like the stunt guys who were setting up the stunt. I have no idea. Um, the sequence where you have the airplane crash and the escape when it comes to Wesley's character, um, Mark Sheridan. That's a pretty well shot sequence. Pretty well done. Some good practical effects, some good stunt work. There's a few other moments here and there that are all right. The bust of Donald Gibb's character in the beginning, when you get the first introduction of Gerard and his team, um, that had some good energy to it when it comes to the overall sequence. But it's not consistent. Like, you have this really lame and boring shootout at one point with with Wesley Snipes and the U.S. Marshals and this guy named Chen, and it there's no sense of palpable energy in that scene. It's like there's stuff happening, but it's not exciting and it's not thrilling. It's just stuff happening. And the scene feels like it goes on forever. And there's a lot of moments like that where it just feels like there's stuff happening on the screen. Like, there's a moment near the end when Wesley Snipes and Tommy Lee Jones get into a little bit of a brawl on a ship, but there's no the way that it's shot and the way that it's edited and the way that everything is presented, it's not exciting. It doesn't really have like a good punch to it, a good sense of energy and life. It's just bland. And a lot of Stuart Baird's direction is bland. Is Stuart bland? That's that's really his direction is just very bland in this, and it was bland in Executive Decision as well. And like I said, his decisions making here didn't do this film any favors. Like, yeah, Wesley Snipes will not do martial arts and just run around, and I'll try to keep up. And speaking of not doing the film any favors, this script is arguably even more disappointing than the direction. So you have a sequel to The Fugitive, and you're going to make Gerard the star. Why in the world would you take away his best trait, which is being a guy who is stern and calm in a tense situation, but also willing to crack a joke? Why would you take the levity out of this character? Now you make him boring and one dimensional. That was not a good idea. And the attempts at humor to try to balance things out with the other characters doesn't really make things better on that front, because a lot of the time the jokes fall flat or the lines fall flat between the other U.S. Marshals. And why in the world would you cast Wesley Snipes and provide him with the most boring character? Like, there's like a couple moments with his character, like near the end, in terms of some dialogue that's kind of okay. But a lot of the time, he's glum, he's super serious, and he's not making any wisecracks. He's not really given anything from this script to utilize his charisma, his charm. Even Harrison Ford had moments like that where he could, say a line and, do some stuff. And you don't really get that with Wesley Snipes' character in this. Also, the script does a bad job making you sympathize with him. I don't understand the critiques that say that, oh, he plays a good sympathetic figure. He doesn't, because the script doesn't really give him enough to make you that sympathetic towards him. Oh, he's got a girlfriend. That romance sucked. I didn't buy it. It didn't work. So that doesn't help, in my opinion. That doesn't make him more sympathetic. That he has some romance that every time it's brought up in the story, it just feels like it's tacked on. That doesn't help. What would have helped is having some scenes where, he's helping somebody, doing something humanitarian, or making it more clear that he was screwed over and framed early on. If you're going to make him into another innocent guy who's on the run, then you got to make that more clear from the beginning. Instead, it's a little too vague, so you don't necessarily know whether or not he's guilty. That's not a good thing when it comes to this kind of movie and this kind of structure that they're trying to go for. Now, I did read somewhere that the initial plan was for Sheridan's character to be guilty. And they actually shot the film that way. But then the test audiences hated that, so then they reshot it and made it so it was more like The Fugitive. If that's the case, they should have stuck to their guns, because there's no sense whatsoever, in my opinion, involved with just doing the same thing as The Fugitive, but worse. Like, why? Like, why even bother going that route if you're going to do it in such a half-ass fashion anyway? Just stick to your guns, make him the bad guy, and go from there. At least that would have been a little bit different. Okay, The Fugitive actually is guilty, and he actually is a villain. And then we don't pull off this dumb, predictable twist with Robert Downey Jr.'s character, which is another problem with the screenplay. Like, come on now. You could see that coming from a mile away when it comes to Royce being a bad guy. The script did a really bad job hiding that. So when it finally gets to the point where the twist is revealed, you're rolling your eyes because you're like, come on now. I already saw this coming like 30 minutes ago. And I know some people might say that about The Doctor and The Fugitive, but like The Fugitive was so well written in other areas that that didn't really hurt the movie. Here, there's all this other stuff that's going on that's not really that great for the most part, so it definitely hurts the film more, especially since it's a lot of build up to that moment. But I will admit, it does have its moments. The opening bust with the U.S. Marshals in action, taking out Conroy. I like that sequence. Minus the stupid chicken suit. I don't know what the hell that. Oh wait, that was another decision by the director. I forgot to mention that when I was talking about Stuart Baird's just questionable decision making when it comes to this movie. It was his decision, if I remember correctly, to change things from what was in the script, which was a opening scene where Gerard dressed it like a priest, but then he was like, "No, put him in a chicken suit. It's more interesting." I'm like, it's not more interesting. It's stupid. It automatically makes your hero look like a fool. That was not a good idea. It really is also a massive tonal shift at a very early point in the movie. So I don't understand. It's like now I feel like I'm watching a film that's taking place in the same universe as Stroke or Ace with Burt Reynolds. That's not what you want out of U.S. Marshals with your first opening scene and your first reveal of Gerard in a Gerard focused sequel. But after that, it's actually not too bad when it comes to that sequence. And so I like that scene other than the chicken suit. Now, when it comes to the whole plane sequence, that was great. Some really good practical effects. It was bombastic. It was epic. It was somewhat familiar because it's another crash, but instead of it being a train and a bus, it's a plane. But I still felt there was enough of a twist on things that I didn't feel like it was just exactly the same thing all over again. Plus, having Gerard on the plane while it's crashing was definitely a good touch. And you bring in the rest of the U.S. Marshals crew, and they get involved in the investigation. You bring in Robert Downey Jr.'s character, and maybe with a different script, maybe with a different actor other than Robert Downey Jr., maybe this whole thing with Gerard and Royce would work better. But the way that it's set up in the movie is just not really that strong, and it's not fun. Like what you want is like a duel of personalities, and you just get oil and water, and that's not fun for anybody. Um, Also, like, other than the plane crash and, like, a little bit in the opening with the bust of, Conroy, there's not a lot happening in the first hour. So, it's a bit tedious in terms of, like and slow when it comes to the buildup, when it comes to, the way that the first half of the story is paced. It doesn't help either that you have this completely useless romance with, Mark and Marie, or this whole thing with Kate Nelligan's character. I believe that's who it was. Yeah, Kate Nelligan's character, who is like the real a boss of the U.S. Marshals, and she's kind of hinted at as being a love interest for Gerard, or at the very least, they've had a fling in the past. Whenever it cut back to that, like, I did not care at all. Like, that did not help the movie. That did not help the story. It was not a strength. I don't know why they kept going back to it. And the mystery is just not that interesting either. Oh, something involving the CIA, FBI, former agent who gets framed, and then this whole game of who done it that is really obvious. You know that it's either some of the guys at the DSS, like the guys who seem to be acting a little shady and they're behind it, or it's Royce. You know that it's somebody in the DSS. That is very blatantly obvious and clear pretty early on in the movie. So it's just a game of, you know, taking out a certain suspect at a certain point throughout the movie while you're watching it. You're like, yeah, it's not that guy. That's too obvious. It's not going to be him because he's not given that much screen time. It's Robert Downey Jr., isn't it? It's Royce. And like, oh, it is. Wow, what a stunner! I'm so shocked by that reveal. And like I said, there's just a lot of scenes where there's not a lot happening. Wesley Snipes' character seems grounded in a multitude of different ways. The script gives him next to nothing to work with in terms of charisma or charm or fun lines or anything. He's not really using his smarts that much or his training a whole lot, except for maybe like one or two scenes. A lot of the time, he's just on the run in the most generic way possible. Oh, I'm gonna kidnap. I'm gonna, well, not kidnap, but kind of. I'm gonna take a semi, and I'm gonna hold the couple that's in the semi at gunpoint, and we're gonna blow past the checkpoint. I'm gonna hide from Gerard and his men in a swamp, and I'm gonna get away after I shoot Gerard. And that was kind of something because you're like, okay, you shot him, because it's like, I'm not gonna, you're not gonna stop me kind of thing. But then after that, like, what do you really get? Snipes wearing a bad wig and a bad disguise that Snipes himself even thought looked like shit and wasn't happy with, and a boring shootout that goes on forever I think it's at a graveyard or something. You get one cool stunt where Snipes' character, uh, Sheridan, jumps off that roof, lands on another building, and then jumps on a train. Even the finale at the end was kind of weak, with a lame fight between Tommy Lee Jones and Wesley Snipes, and some boring finale where Wesley is he's literally grounded at that moment because he's tied up in a hospital bed and incapacitated, and then it's just a shootout between Gerard and Royce. And another thing that I think was a mistake too was making it so obvious that Royce shot the other U.S. Marshal, the younger guy, shot the kid. I mean, it's like, what? You're just gonna make it totally blatantly obvious that Royce is the bad guy. I'm like, come on. Like, you're not gonna misdirect the audience or even make an attempt to do so. And that's another thing that I found out was the result of the studio caving to the test audience. What is up with caving to the test audience so much? It's a small group of people, and they aren't always right. And they definitely weren't right in this instance because you're doing all this work to try to obfuscate and hide Royce as the villain, and then you make it obvious. Like, really? Just ignore the test audience. They don't know what they're talking about. because they think that the best route to go is to make the villain who is in hiding and in the shadows for the majority of the movie obvious before the reveal. So yeah, it makes it look like I'm not a fan of this film at all. And that's not true. Like the reason why this movie is okay is because a couple of like three action set pieces, the plane crash, bits in the opening with the bust of Conroy, and the stunt, the big stunt where Sheridan jumps off the building onto another building and then jumps onto a train. And some moments with the US Marshals team, and some of the stuff with Tommy Lee Jones. And speaking of Tommy Lee, this cast I think honestly isn't the problem. Like Tommy Lee Jones is fine. He's still fun to watch. I still like him playing this role. It's still nice to see him reprise his role as Gerard. It's one of my favorite roles of his. So it's nice to see him on one more adventure. But at the same time, the script doesn't really allow Tommy Lee Jones to really bring to this film what he brought to The Fugitive, because it just makes him so much less charismatic because of him being more of the serious, straight leading man role, which I don't understand that anyway. Like, you can be a serious, straight leading man and then also have fun with it. You don't have to be more serious. There's no reason for that, especially when you have Wesley Snipes being very toned down. So now you have two toned down leads. At least have one of them be more dynamic. So then the back and forth between them is more interesting. And speaking of Snipes, yeah, it's honestly one of his most forgettable roles to me. It's like right up there with his role in Boiling Point, which I think also came out it came out, I think that came out like 93 or something. Uh, so Boiling Point to me is one of Wesley's more forgettable roles, and I feel the same way about his role in this. And it's disappointing because there's something there, but like this script doesn't really give him much to work with. He's not really able to say any sort of charming lines or any sort of uh, uh, quotes until the very end that are at all kind of memorable. Most of the time, he's just on the run and isn't even really able to use much of his physicality because he's not able to use his own fighting style. I just think that if you're gonna make Tommy Lee Jones more of a straight leading man, where he's, more by the book and he's not so off the cuff, then have Wesley Snipes be the opposite. Have Wesley be more outgoing, charismatic, and, antagonistic. Because he can do that. I mean, look no further than Demolition Man when it comes to his performance as Simon Phoenix. So let Wesley be Wesley, basically. But he's not given that opportunity. And I think you can tell that he's not really super big on his role in this at a certain point. Because even he's like, man, like, I can't do what I want to do because this director won't let me do it. And this script is just not giving me much to work with. Here we go. I'm just going to give him my best shot. I guess at one point they were considering Samuel L. Jackson for the role. I don't really think that would have made it any better because the issue is the script, it's not the actor. Robert Downey Jr. I like Robert Downey Jr. as an actor. This is definitely not one of his strongest roles. Definitely not one of his best performances. This is a paycheck role. He even admitted he did it so he could do a role that maybe his kids would like. Like, when you get to that point, it's the epitome of a paycheck role, and his performance really does showcase that. He can play good, menacing villains. He's done that in the past. Look at something like In Dreams. That's a really different kind of movie. Doesn't completely work, but Robert Downey Jr. is pretty solid as the killer in that. So he can do that kind of stuff, but he's got to be motivated. And I don't think he was motivated at all. He was motivated for the money, and that's it. And like he said, he wasn't given a lot to do. He's just a guy running around with a gun for most of the movie. So it's not like he's really given a lot to work with. But even then, like, there's more that he could have done with it that he didn't do. It's just very one note performance by Downey. Joe Pantoliano's doing the best he can as Cosmo, still fun, still has some good rapport with Tommy Lee Jones. Uh, Daniel Roebuck, it's more of the same, as well as some of the other cast members. LaTanya Richardson as Deputy Cooper, Tom Wood, Johnny Lee Davenport. But the rest of the cast, though, like Irene Jacob was awful as Marie. She was cast by Baird because he liked her in some foreign film she did at Sundance. That's another thing that is directly attributed to the director in terms of a questionable decision. How many decisions are there at this point that are directly attributed to Baird? It's got to be at least like 4 or 5 at this point. Case in point, wrong director for this movie. If you're like, oh, I thought she was good in a Sundance movie, she'd be the right choice for the role. Why? She had no chemistry with Wesley Snipes, so it made this already pointless love story even more boring to watch. And she doesn't really have much of a screen presence either, and she's not that good of an actress. So that doesn't help. And Kate Nelligan, I don't I'm honestly I don't think she was that good either. Poor man's Faye Dunaway. It's a kind of performance that she provided, in my opinion, to this film. And like Michael Paul Chan as Chen, like he was in it for 5 minutes. Donald Gibb was fun as Conroy. This this big and tough convict who's hard to go down. I liked his performance. And maybe hard to go down probably isn't the right word to use. It was hard to take down. I'm sorry. But like it's just other than like Donald Gibb and maybe a couple other supporting actors, like this isn't really like the best cast, but it's capable enough. And there's enough talented people in the cast that it should have been better. The end result should have been better. The cinematography by Andres Bartuak, it's all right. It's fine. I don't think it's anywhere near as visually impressive at points as The Fugitive was. The editing by Terry Rawlings is not terrible. It's pretty uh, um, decent. At times, it's better than that. It's better than average, especially when it comes to some of the more bigger action set pieces. The score by Jerry Goldsmith, it's honestly one of his most forgettable scores. I don't really remember a single note from this score, and I am a huge fan of Jerry Goldsmith. And what's funny is his temp scores were used for The Fugitive when editing was being done in post production, while the composer of the Fugitive score, James Newton Howard, was working on the movie. And James Newton Howard was intimidated by Goldsmith's temp scores. They got the man who intimidated Howard, and he delivered like one of his most forgettable scores for this movie. Now, the pacing is also off, even though it's like around the same running time as the first movie. Because it drags more. Because you're not as engaged by it, because you don't really care about the mystery as much. You don't know whether or not Snipes' character is innocent right off the bat. They don't do a good job making him that sympathetic of a figure in comparison to Harrison Ford in The Fugitive. And there's some okay action set pieces at points, but a lot of it gets a bit repetitive and doesn't really bring the same level of thrills as The Fugitive. It's a middling movie. It's a middling film, middling sequel. You can do worse, but you can also do a lot better when it comes to the thriller genre. And it definitely pales in comparison to The Fugitive. But that's just my thoughts on US Marshals. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.